50 years ago, almost to the day, Paul Revere wrote out of Boston, warning people that the British are coming. Now, the agents are coming, and we're about to have a fantastic panel. Introduce you to Ramesh Raskar.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. It's definitely a dawn of the Internet of AI agents. We have seen many such dawns. One was by, Tim Berners-Lee in 1991, when he realized that although many of the tools that are being used by scientists to share documents, to share results, are on the internet, there's a big difference between what the internet does with FTP and Telnet and DNS to the World Wide Web. Because the internet was connecting machines, but we needed something that connects people. And that was the dawn of the World Wide Web. There are four main things that Tim Berners-Lee did right here at MIT, which is URL, where are the websites, HTTP for the servers, HTML to render the pages, and of course the browser. And those four simple things created a multi-trillion-dollar revolution and how we connect with each other. I think we're at the dawn of another era like this, which is the Internet of AI agents. Now, there's a big difference between the way we think about agents today, which is they're within siloed organizations, and they trust each other, and they have a known topology, to the web of agents, where they will navigate and discover and learn and earn on our behalf. And that web of AI agents is going to look very different. I'm here with four amazing folks. I'm going to ask each of them to do 3-minute opening comments of how they're thinking about various aspects of this web of AI agents, the Internet of AI agents. They span all the way from edge AI, about what happens when compute moves from mainframes to our edge devices, so that we are not dependent on central machines for training, inference, and to connect with each other. It involves privacy-preserving computation. It involves verifiability and security. A big component is knowledge markets, like data markets. And we'll also hear about what does the new UX look like? What does the large population models for this look like? So I'm going to request all our amazing panelists to introduce themselves with their opening 3-minute comments, starting with Aditya.
Thanks, Ramesh. Excited to be here. I work in Edge AI and with Ramesh's lab in a couple of ways. So I lead a research team at Microsoft related to Edge AI. I teach AI at Stanford, and I work with Ramesh as our working group here. So I'm very familiar with Edge AI specifically, and specifically super excited about the NANDA initiative that Ramesh's team is launching, because it works so well with Edge AI and really unlocks the next layer of AI. And let me explain really quickly what Edge AI is, where the status of it is, and why NANDA is so important and exciting. So you may be familiar with Edge AI in that we run AI on small devices. So for example, Siri running on your phones, or dictation is an example of Edge AI. And we know that Edge AI is super important to unlock the real value of AI, because that's when it feels human. So we know that 10 milliseconds of latency, or sorry, 100 milliseconds of latency, which is how much time it takes for a request to go from your phone to a server and back, generates a 10 to 20% drop off in retention. So if you cut that off, you increase retention significantly, you increase usage significantly. So, and why we do that is because we know Edge AI is what we need for AI to feel human. And so Edge AI is at that level where we can already do those things. Like we can already do detection. We're getting to the point where hardware is getting unlocked, where we're putting smaller models on smaller devices. Sure. That works really well. The reason why you don't all have Edge AI in your devices right now, why it doesn't work super well, is because there's a missing orchestration layer, such that you can have different models deploy on the same devices, or different agents work off the same devices. Right now, every single model has to customize to your own specific hardware across iPhone or Android or laptops, all this stuff. And what's super exciting about an orchestration layer like NANDA is that it allows agents to work across all of these devices, such that when we've unlocked, and now that we're unlocking this year, a bunch of hardware and models that run on small devices, NANDA will actually allow agents to run on all of this. So that's why we're here, and we're super excited about this work.
Hi,
Anil?
Anil Sharma. I had what is called a global co-innovation network for a company called TCS. TCS is a large services and consulting firm with over 30 billion in revenue. Today we are in this transition within the company, if I may say, intranet of agents. And we face the same kind of issues which we are talking about in internet of agents, because we have departments own their own data, they have funded their own initiatives, and this whole idea of how do you build decentralized intelligence to make sense for company as a whole, I think, and we are very excited to partner with MIT in this initiative, and I'll speak more on that.
Anna?
So I'm the creator of Vana, which is an open protocol for users to own their data, and then co-founder and CEO of Open Data Labs, which is the company that originally created Vana. Also one of Ramesh's old students in this lab, so great to be back. I think that the reason why these sorts of open standards are really important is that as AI plays a more and more important role in the economy, right, which I think we can see in two ways. One is just like look at pure revenue going to foundation model companies, right? OpenAI upwards of like $12 billion. Two is kind of like AI increasingly becoming a source of truth, right? So when you today ask for information, like it used to be on Google, you kind of know where it's coming from. Now increasingly you're just asking ChatGPT or your AI agent to tell you the answer to something, right? And I think there was an example a few years back of Google Bard, where if you asked it for a historically accurate image of a medieval prince, it would show you like an Indian woman, right? And I think a lot of people were laughing about, oh, this is this crazy wokeness of the 2020s. But if there weren't another source of truth, that would just become true, right? And people will just increasingly get their information from AI. So whoever is deciding what goes into that AI is essentially like deciding truth in society. At Vana, we really focus on the data part of the stack. So we have ways for users to kind of own their data, pool it to train different AI models, give agents access to it. We take kind of an unusual approach where usually people think about companies as owning data. With Vana, kind of users are owning their own data. So a lot of people don't realize that you have legal ownership over all your data. So in the same way that when you park your car in a parking lot, the parking lot doesn't own your car. When you put your data in a platform, it's still entirely legally yours, right? So you can always go and export your Google Drive files, your email, whatever it is. So we take the approach of having users export that, pool it together, and then train it, use it to train kind of better and better AI models.
Fantastic. So we got Edge AI, we got enterprise, we got data. David.
I'm Dave London, the founder of Link Ventures. It's a venture fund right across the street here. We manage about $1 billion of portfolio investments, all seed stage investments. Actually, I posted on LinkedIn this week that our companies that we started from scratch in our accelerator space just crossed $1 billion of revenue, $100 million on the bottom line. So that was a big milestone for us. So I was a 23-time founder, co-founder before becoming a venture capitalist. Ramesh's class, Foundations of AI Ventures, teach with him or co-teach with him on Thursday mornings right up here. And over the years have heard a lot of great ideas from Ramesh, but this one is like the epic, takes the cake. One thing I noticed, in open source, if you say where are the licenses, there's the MIT license and the Berkeley license that dominate open source. It's not the Anthropic and the Google license, it's the MIT and Berkeley. So now within agentic AI, we have MCP, Model Context Protocol, came out from Anthropic. Just a few weeks later, you get A to A, agent to agent from Google. They're creating these standards out of necessity. The AI needs to be able to access the world. It needs to be able to access your laptop to do useful things for you. But what Ramesh has created, I think, is not only a lot more powerful, but also a lot more likely to be sustainable in terms of being neutral. It's not corporate. It's there for the good of the world, very much like the MIT open source license. So just super, super excited about the direction it's going. But the need for it is so acute. The capabilities of the AI that you can run on your laptop are on this exponentially growing curve. And if you use Operator to give it access to your laptop, it can do amazing things for you. You can also delete everything in 2 seconds. So there has to be some kind of a protocol, some kind of a way to empower the AI to help you in your life that's also safe and secure and reliable. So that's just on your laptop. Then you think in terms of, well, now it's going to go out into the world. It's going to access my bank account. It's going to buy things for me. And that's where you really get into sensitive territory. But I don't think there's a better person on the planet to think this through than Ramesh. So it's really encouraging.
All right. For now, my role is to have a good panel without a cake fight. So let's dive into it, right? We are saying this is the beginning of the new era, the internet of AI agents, the web of AI agents. There are many building blocks that are required. So let's talk a few minutes about the building blocks, and then we'll wrap up with what could be some risks we do with this. So Aditya, if you want to start, what are some key building blocks and any learnings we have from the web era or the mobile era that we should or shouldn't do as we go forward? And I'll ask my panelists to ask similar questions. What are the initial building blocks?
So we believe that there's 3 building blocks, especially to something around decentralized AI or Internet of AI agents. There's compute, data, and autonomy. And why we say autonomy instead of intelligence or anything like this is because, intelligence is often associated with all of these models, but we want autonomy to be somewhat independent. Like some people call it sovereignty instead, but we want autonomy to be an independent part. So compute, ideally, which happens at the edge on your own device, data which you own, which you run, or potentially you keep on the cloud, but ideally you own, and then autonomy, which is any intelligence that you deem to work for you. Those are what we think are the 3 building blocks to Internet of AI agents.
So when you think about big tech companies, and you're one of them, there's obviously initial customers you want to serve, but the Internet of AI is really how do you connect different aspects. Even organizations that don't trust each other, they could be competing with each other. How are you thinking about that?
No, that's exactly. So when we think about AI agents, what we've learned, and this is not just through Microsoft, but through our research at Stanford and other other places as well, it doesn't work when it's super centralized. Because people, or when people buy different workflows, and that's only exaggerated when people buy different agents or work with different agents, they don't trust when it's just from one place. They trust it better, or they use it better when it works with different sources and it's a wider ecosystem. I mean, a great example of this is, with Microsoft itself, when we try to do something where it's very closed, and we have to build our own apps and our own setups, it doesn't necessarily work. But when we open source our ecosystem, it thrives a lot more. And so very similarly, we know that AI agents only works when there's a centralized orchestration layer or decentralized ecosystem.
Excellent. Anil, what are some building blocks and how to think about it?
I think for me, the most important building block is to build the incentive models. I think, if you don't build initially, in this initial stage of this transition to Internet of Agents, building incentive, right incentive, is a key to adoption. I think the second part would be, I would say, a federated reasoning paradigm. If I can reason over a set of Internet agents, then only I can make sense. So I think the way we look at it is, if you look at work, enterprise work is a set of value chains. The value chain may span within your company, it will span beyond the company. And the value chain then needs to be translated into tasks, and each task needs a fine-tuned or a special agent. And now to orchestrate this entire work, as I said, the incentive and reasoning system over the entire value chain is critical to build that right. And I think those are 2 things. And I would also say that in this whole thing, one more thing which we worry about is this role of humans. Right now, while agents can talk to each other, we also feel that today there is a lot of variance in the quality of work humans do, whether you're doctors, engineers, software developer. And so another building block we have to worry about is how do you build personal augmentation to people, right? So they can really participate in this future. Otherwise, I don't see, we don't want to get a scenario where humans are out of it, they lose jobs because they are not able to participate in this new economy. I think those are things we worry about.
So I'm glad you mentioned orchestration and incentive.
Yeah.
And that almost maps to kind of the human society.
Correct.
There. So it's an interesting observation. Anna, what are some building blocks?
Yeah, the core building blocks for AI that I see are really research, compute, and data. I think a lot of people are most familiar with compute because it's kind of easiest to see, like, okay, people are buying lots of H100s. Research, I think a lot of it is open source, but it is kind of closed source to some extent. Data is the piece that we really focus on. And I think kind of breaking down data for people, a lot of the time when you interact with an AI model, it might just kind of feel like magic, but it really is just like a statistical representation of all of its training data, right? So if you look at Llama 3, it's trained on around 15 trillion words. And most of that training data just comes from scraping the whole public internet. And one of the really surprising things about AI today is that we're actually kind of running out of training data. And that's this idea of the data wall, where if you look at the whole public internet, it is around 15 trillion words, right? So we've actually taught AI with all of the publicly available information out there. And then the question is, if we want to build better AI and better AI agents, where do we get that kind of next frontier of data? And the approach that we take is through users, right? So how do you have 100 million users contributing data from all these different platforms that usually would be private, so you can actually train the best foundation model and the best agent, right? I think that fundamentally what these different building blocks come down to is how do you actually create like better intelligence, which is everybody's goal. Like how do you create almost like AGI? And so those are the core building blocks I see, and data is really the piece where we focus.
I mean, your comment about training, I mean, once things move to the edge, as Aditya was talking about, it's quite possible that we'll train things ourselves. And so the role of data versus model will change quite a bit because on one end, for certain applications, maybe for medical diagnostics, you may have to bring everything in one place to train it. But in other cases, let's say my personal life, like the movie Her, a lot of the things will be trained locally. So how are you thinking about that distinction between training happening with centralized data versus training happening on the edge?
Yeah, so I think at the individual level, you want as much happening on the edge as possible. If folks have used like the new ChatGPT memory feature, I'm like almost terrified by how much it knows about me, but it is so convenient that I'm like, okay, I'll take the trade-off right now. You should ask it like, what are my deepest fears, right? And you're like, oh God, it's so accurate. Anyway, like basically, if you want really powerful AI, you probably need to give it a ton of individual context, and that can all happen at the edge. But if you want to be training kind of collective models, right, AI models, you have them at the individual level where you can kind of fine tune it on your own data. But if you look at the base model, that is an aggregate of kind of all of humanity's data, then the question is like, where does that training actually happen? And so in that case, you could have it at the edge if you're doing it in a fully federated way. Some of that is not quite possible from a research perspective, but it is getting there. And we're actually training, doing full pre-training of a foundation model with Flower AI, which we'll present later across a bunch of the Vana data. So yeah, ideally as much as possible at the edge, but at the collective level, you do need some place where people can kind of pool their data together if you don't have a trusted device at the edge. So we rely on trusted execution environments for that today.
So you want platforms that are flexible between training in one place or another place. Dave, what are some building blocks that you're seeing or excited about?
One that we talk about a lot, actually, as I was coming down the stairs to get down to the stage, I got an alert that Synthesia hit $100 million of revenue. Synthesia, we had them at Davos a year and 2 months ago, they had like no revenue. And so I wrote back, well, where's it coming from? And it's all coming from very small consumer subscriptions, people wanting to create a video, and you're like, well, anyone who's done any vibe coding, you realize you can build something genuinely useful in an hour, 5 hours. And this litany of useful functions is going to be out there, all these AI agents that are capable of doing something useful for you. When this happened on the internet, nobody could figure out the revenue model, and then it all moved to ad revenue. Because it's just, throw some banner ads on it and throw it out there. That's not going to work with AI agents. You don't want these things marketing to you. So we need some kind of a system for micropayments for all these services. And everybody talked about this when the internet was growing, but nobody figured out how to do it. Now we have crypto, which helps. You have the blockchain, which helps. But this decentralized payment for services is going to be a critical building block for building this entire economy, because people all over the world can create useful things very, very quickly. They have to get to market somehow. Also, when the internet came along, if you had a useful little web widget, the hosting cost was near zero, so you didn't have to worry. But if you're running a little AI agent, it actually uses significant inference time compute. You have to pay for that. So you can't, if you throw it out there and make it free and available, it skyrockets in use. And then you quickly realize, wait, this is pretty expensive for me to host. So you have to have some kind of a way for my agent to pay your agent in very small distributed doses. And I think this is one of the biggest things to solve for NANDA.
Yeah, that's exciting. There's a lot of building blocks that need to be done. So, many of us are excited about protocols like MCP from Anthropic or A2A from Google. And they're really solving kind of the TCP IP problem. And as you saw from this panel, there are many other building blocks that we have to build to create a true internet of AI. And if you see in kind of the different waves of companies that came in the 90s and thousands and 2010s, they were very different kind. In the beginning, the companies that came around, like Yahoo, like Hotmail, and so on, were the ones where internet was good enough to serve them. There was nothing required externally. The second wave that came around was where the internet technologies and some other phenomena was happening at the same time. So things like Facebook, things like Uber, and so on. That's like, okay, it's possible because of the internet, but we still need the rest of the ecosystem to come around. And only in the third phase, we saw entrenched industry kind of start taking on the web and the internet. So this is like, construction industry, healthcare, and so on. So in the beginning, whatever can start right away, and over time, the entrenched industries. So let's switch to, what are some ways that this could roll out, but also let's talk about what could be some risks. I mean, the internet and web started out with pretty scammy stuff in the beginning, a lot of gambling, a lot of pornography, and so on in the beginning. What do you see the role? How would it roll out? What kind of applications would you see emerge in the beginning, and how do we manage them? Who wants to start?
Right.
Go ahead, Aditya.
Oh, yeah. So I think, we identify three main risks in this, both at Stanford and Microsoft. There's three main risks in this Internet of AI agents. The number one is trust, obviously. So the things that you mentioned around identity and fraud and all of these pieces. Number two is what we call culture. So when we say culture, we mean things like, what are the societal standards for how an agent can interact with you? Like, can an agent DM you on LinkedIn on behalf of another person? Or do they have to say they're an agent or something like this, like establishing that sense of culture? And then the third piece is this orchestration, which is obviously what NANDA is about, which is, how do these agents talk to each other from a more protocol setup? And we think those three things are actually what made the internet grow really quickly in the first place. Like, there was a really sense of strong culture. Even if there wasn't a lot of trust necessarily, there was a lot of protocols around HTTP and TCP and all these things where you could identify a sense of a general identity. And obviously there's orchestration around the just general DNS and things like this. And so we think those three are the critical frameworks, and I can talk about the risks of that afterwards as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
What are some applications you're seeing? What are some risks you're seeing?
Oh, I think the risks are similar. I think that whatever principle applies to AI, assurance, ethics, bias, privacy, all of this will apply to this paradigm.
They'll just get amplified.
And get amplified. It will get amplified. But if you're asking what kind of application I would like to see, first, I would like to see application in sustainability. I would like to see this in social impact in areas such as agriculture and other places where the world as a whole struggle about, because this is where the data and value is locked across ecosystems. If we then beyond enterprises into non-profit to government, and I think this is probably an area where there will be higher reception and higher value as well.
And is that because you're talking about things like agriculture and so on? Is that because there is no baggage there? They could switch back to Internet of AI agents.
Yeah, they can leapfrog. They can leapfrog from where they are today to a completely new paradigm.
Wow, we should send that message out to all the founders and entrepreneurs here. Don't just create another coding agent, but just jump straight to agriculture.
Right.
What are some applications areas you're seeing and some risks?
Yeah, I think with AI agents, it kind of increasingly seeing them be quite autonomous and be able to almost do work on your behalf, right? You can imagine a couple of years out, you've got an AI agent, like I picture like 10 AI Anna agents that can go and autonomously do work and maybe even earn on their behalf and collaborate with others. And I think one of the risks is that there's a single platform that owns all of those agents, right? And they can almost, I'm like, oh, they could put AI Anna and kind of trap her or take her away, right? And so I think especially as your AI agents start to produce real economic value, it's really important that you actually have kind of sovereignty and true ownership over that. I think of it as kind of AI really raising the stakes for data ownership. Drawing an analogy back to the early web, I don't know if folks have seen in the early MIT Media Lab, people actually thought as we use more and more services, people would have to carry around physical devices to have their data on them, right? Because why would you trust like anybody else to have your data? And I think the internet played out very differently from that, right? These days we're used to kind of cloud services where typically your data is stored with the company whose product you're using. But I think as we see this huge shift into AI, it's kind of this opportunity to actually shift a lot of the data ownership and kind of control back towards the individual.
We'll be carrying big hard drives again.
Yeah, I think we don't need to we have phones now, right? We also have pretty good encryption, so you can just kind of get guarantees of that without necessarily needing to physically lug around some machine in your backpack.
I still have nightmares from carrying all those disks, especially when you move a house as a grad student from one place to another. You know, you can lose all your data in one go. What are some applications, some risks you're seeing, Dave?
God, there's so many. I think the unbundling of CRM is imminent. Microsoft will have to deal with this in a hurry. But when you look at enterprise software as a whole, like Salesforce.com being a classic example, it's expensive, it's insanely profitable for the company that offers it, and people use 2% of the functionality. Now AI comes along, builds something much more specific to what you need, costs next to nothing. And it can't happen soon enough from my point of view, but I'm not a shareholder in Microsoft or Salesforce.com. I'm sure it's scary as hell to them. And that's why they have big AI teams, because they need to get ahead of this. But those microservices are so much more customized and effective to what you specifically need. And it's just a unbundling of the capability to getting deployed that's holding it back. But I think one thing you see all the time is that when HTML, HTTPS came along, any framework is better than no framework.
Right.
And a quick and dirty framework that works, because it's so much pent-up capability and the models are getting better at this ridiculous exponential rate, the pent-up capacity is so large that anything that unleashes that capability is going to get adopted overnight.
Yeah.
So you use the word rollout, but rollout in the age of AI is like, a minute, we were talking about. So I think it's just a beautiful thing, though. If you put MIT branding around it, then people trust it. If it's really well thought through, you get some of your best minds thinking about it, it's going to be good enough just by virtue of existing at all. And so that's the key.
So we appreciate everyone's thought, but let's do a quick poll. Who here thinks that the agents, the AI agents, the web of agents will appear more like the open, vibrant World Wide Web versus the way we see the App Store and the Play Store, where you have a very curated experience, but on a very limited platform. So how many things are going to roll out or take off as a open, vibrant World Wide Web of agents? And how many things is going to go down the route of an App Store or an agent store? All right, what about both? All right. So I think it's going to be interesting. We'll probably come back on this panel in about 3 months.
Okay.
And the world will have moved on to your point about it's not just a rollout, but a rapid takeoff. And hopefully it'll be highly democratic, highly decentralized, and we'll be creating our own agents, and we will have ability for even a farmer to go create their own agents so they can work in the economy, not just the software engineers who are creating agents for the coding. Thank you very much.
Here we go.
So, Ramesh, 1 second. We have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Sure. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Anybody want to ask a question? Well, no question.
In the back.
There's all over the place.
Thank you. So a lot of conversation about the agents, and neither was not an option, because I was going to raise my hand if you said neither the app or the other option you gave. But so I don't hear you guys talking much about emergent technologies. I'm curious to know what your thought is along those lines, and really moving completely away from LLM altogether and creating something that's more universal along the lines of having AI sort of like writing right inside of your own mobile phone client side.
Yeah, moving beyond LLM or some emergent technologies that could be part of a highly consumer-facing or highly customized experience. Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to do that. I mean, we do that work. We obviously actively investigate it with OpenAI, in partnership with OpenAI, but models that go beyond just LLMs, and and what we call are ambiently intelligent. So, for example, would proactively know about your own information, or would write a specific model for you, or do anything like that. I mean, I can't make any predictions that are formal, but I would say we are quite far away from that. Obviously everybody talks about the exponential rise of AI and all of these models, but that's because compute and data have been so rapidly increasing, essentially. Well, now we're data constrained, but they've been so rapidly improving, but we're now almost like data and algorithm constrained. So unless we find a way to exponentially increase data, which maybe Ivana can help us with, it would be really hard for us to continue that exponential rate and get to that in a really quick stage. So we are actively exploring it. We don't know where it's going to go.
I think we're going to cap it there.
All right, thank you.
We ran out of time. Thank you, Ramesh.
That should just
the team.